Hey, in this video today I'm gonna compare Westworld and Future World. Westworld is actually done by Michael Crichton. It's a similar premise to Jurassic Park, where you have this theme park, amusement park that's created by humans that's supposed to be a fun vacation spot, but then things go wrong, the park breaks down. There are people that are trying to escape from it. Similar ballpark. Obviously, the difference is that Jurassic Park has dinosaurs, Westworld has robots. Future World is a sequel to Westworld. Going to be comparing those two movies to the Psycho franchise. You have the original Psycho movie from 1960, and then you have Psycho 2, 3, and 4 that are direct follow ups to the original movie. Then you have a remake that came out in the 90s. You also have a TV show called Bates Motel, which I have seen. I really enjoy that show. But when it comes to the highest Rotten Tomatoes score for each franchise, Westworld has a really solid score, 84%, which is certified fresh by 9%. But it's not as high as the highest score for the Psycho franchise. That original movie has a 97%, which is obviously fantastic. Psycho wins in this case. Then when you look at the lowest score for each franchise, Future World has a score of 36%, which obviously is bad. But Psycho has a lower score than that, though, because Psycho 4, The Beginning, which is not a movie a lot of people are really talking about because of the lower budget, it was direct to video, that only has a 20%. So Westworld actually wins this point. Then when you look at the average score, Psycho has an average of 55, whereas Westworld has an average of 60. So Westworld actually wins this round, meaning Westworld is ahead right now 2-1. Then when you look at the gap between lowest and highest score, with Psycho, pretty big gap as you can tell. And highest score 97, lowest score 20, so gap of 77. In the case of Westworld, highest score 84, lowest score 36. So you have a gap of 48. So the gap's lower for Westworld, thus Westworld wins this point, meaning Westworld is going to win this debate already, regardless of my personal opinion. But let's look at this though. Which franchise do I prefer? Honestly, I like both Westworld and Future World. In the case of Future World, it's a sequel where we learn that there's this new amusement theme park thing that's been created by the same company that made Westworld. This new thing is called Future World. It's kind of similar because you also have robots, but it's themed more around space. And then there's a reveal later on in the movie that they're actually creating robots in order to replace people. In the case of the Psycho franchise, it's like a prototype for other slashers. I mean, you look at that original movie from 1960, and what you realize is when compared to Saw, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, it's not actually very violent. It's not very bloody or very gory. The horror is more implied rather than outright shown to the audience. Here's the biggest example of that. Think about that iconic shower scene from the original movie. When you look at it, what you realize is, oh, none of the violence here is actually shown to the audience. None of it's really on screen. It's all just implied or suggested through that utterly chilling score composed by Bernard Herrmann. The way that the camera moves, the quick cut editing of the scene, it all tricks you into thinking the scene is more violent than it really is. There's only actually a few kills in the movie. And then you get to Psycho 2, and overall, I think it's actually a solid sequel to that original movie. I think that the filmmakers found a good way to continue the franchise in this case, where it's set 20 years after the original movie. We learn right away that after Norman Bates was obviously arrested at the end of the first film, he got mental psychiatric help, and thus now he's been judged legally sane. But as you can imagine, Lila is very opposed to this right away. Marion was her sister. Marion was killed by Norman, so it's not really surprising. We also learn there are other people that are opposed to Norman Bates being released, but Norman Bates is legally released. He's sent back to the same place he was in the first film. And so then the movie's about Norman trying to actually live a normal life, trying to actually be a productive member of society, trying to keep his sanity, while there are people that are very skeptical about the idea that Norman Bates could ever be a normal, sane person. And we get the sense very quickly that, oh, someone's screwing around with Norman. Who's doing it? Yeah, what I think is really effective about that movie is that by the end, you feel sad, honestly. You get this feeling, oh man, if only people would have just left Norman Bates alone, maybe he could have actually stayed sane. If people would have stopped screwing around with him, stopped deliberately trying to get him to be insane again, maybe things could have actually turned out better. Maybe all these people could have not died. And so you get this feeling of tragedy when you get to the end. It's like, oh, okay, Norman Bates is back to being insane again. Now, admittedly, there's this one scene in the movie where you have teenagers going down to the basement of the Bates house. We see, oh, they're doing drugs and hooking up. I'm like, wow, okay, I do not like this scene. Why? Because it feels derivative. It feels like it's ripped right out of Friday the 13th. Like, okay, yeah, we're doing this again. This is so common in a horror movie, where teenagers are killed because they go to an isolated location and they're misbehaving. And then something scary happens, they get killed. So it's designed to make you not feel sorry for the people who died. Because you're supposed to go, oh, okay, well, I'm not really feeling bad for you because you brought this on yourself. You chose to go to an isolated location. You chose to do something you shouldn't have. But aside from that, however, I think Psycho 2 does work. Then you get to Psycho 3, which I have not seen. I haven't heard good things about it. So I'm like, no, that just doesn't interest me. Then I have seen Psycho 4, The New Beginning, and you can certainly tell that it's a lower budget, made for TV movie, but I don't think it's all that bad. I like the idea that because so much time has passed, Norman actually is leading a relatively normal life. He actually is married. He has a house that he's living in that's not the Bates family house we've seen in the other movies. But then he learns that his wife is pregnant, and he's utterly convinced that if there's a child born, the child will just continue the cycle. It will be insane as well. There'll be more murders. So Norman Bates is like, I need to put a stop to this. I need to do something bad for the sake of not letting this madness and insanity continue. Then you get to the end, and Norman decides to actually not kill his wife. And then you get to the end. The last note that it ends on is Norman and his wife leave the Bates family house, which went up in flames. It's destroyed, basically, at the end. And then we hear the voice of Norman's mother saying, Norman, help me. And then those doors close. So you leave this feeling of, oh, okay, Norman Bates actually was able to move on from the madness. So hopefully now he can actually live a normal life after everything he went through. Overall, if I had to say which franchise I prefer, I would actually say Westworld because I think it's more consistent. Admittedly, there are less movies, so that certainly helps, but I think, yeah, it is more consistent quality-wise. That'll be it for this video.